Okay, well, it's allegedly working now. Oh, you're running that new gen. I see how it is. Humble
What's
flex.
that?
You got the Frostbox. It's a unique decor for having the Xbox Series S or X.
Oh,
Us,
is that what that is?
yeah, us filthy last gen peasants don't have such opportunity. So if you, hmm?
What's that?
I don't. I thought it sounded like you're responding to somebody else beside you. In any case, if you slap that on your vehicle, you'll see that it has some particles like floating out, like it's a fridge light,
Yeah,
some mist and whatnot.
yeah. There's some radioactive something in there or whatever.
Hmm.
I don't usually use it just because it takes up a lot of space.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, I used it at first, obviously.
Yeah, well, I mean, decor also gives you bonus rep, as you can see, up to a max of 25%. So generally, it's not a bad
Yep.
idea to have it on the vehicle, but at the same time, you obviously have a very small selection currently.
Well, I always go up to 25, but I just now that I have other
Mm,
stuff, I don't use this one because it's bulky.
fair enough. All right,
All right.
so
Don't laugh at my stuff.
that's fine. I mean, honestly, well, it looks like you have the battle pass, and I couldn't tell if you picked up another. It looks like you picked up a pack as well.
Yeah, I've got a couple of packs. How do I get out of here? So, like, I bought a couple of them. I bought Famine and the Keeper just because I wanted certain things they had.
Hmm.
And then these two were free, I think. Or this
Snappy
one
was
was.
free. There was
This one maybe it
also
was like $7 or something, five
yeah,
bucks.
yeah. Born Free was on sale a couple weeks ago. I want to say that there was a couple of free packs within the last few months, but they may have been time limited. I thought they were still going on, but if you don't have them, then I guess not. Um, yeah. So I mean, I'm not going to judge your purchase decisions, but in any case, having it. Wait a minute. If you go back to that pack tab, did it literally only show the four you own?
Yeah, so like I've noticed that when the game, goes into like standby mode
Mm-hmm.
and I just turn it on, that's what shows up in the shop. I have to kill the game to see all the packs in here.
Interesting. I imagine they probably do that so that you can't like lock in prices or something, so it just disables any
Yeah,
of the like
maybe.
live versions or something. I don't. I
I mean, you
don't.
can see them. You can see them in the store and stuff, but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I don't have, like I said, I don't have the fancy new gen, so I don't see the like I don't have standby or whatnot. But I know what you're talking about. Regan's talked about it as well. Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, like just having those packs is going to give you a hell of a lot more options than other people at a similar spot. So, generally, what I suggest starting with is sort of picking a weapon that you want to build around, selecting a cabin that synergizes with that. Then once you have the cabin, you can sort of figure out what modules you need. Like if you have a 12 energy cabin, obviously you'll have more energy available than if you're running an epic or like a heavy cabin, or if you're running a special tier cabin or lower. Likewise, that'll also let you know if you need a engine, sort of what the speed boost on stuff you have available is going to be. So yeah, so you do have a smattering of stuff. You have coins, you have crowns. Honestly, you're in a hell of a lot better spot than most people at the amount of time in the game, just as a result of you spending money on it. Um,
right.
yeah, so
And I played a good amount and built some stuff too. But yeah,
yeah, well, and all wealth is cumulative in this game, right? Anytime you spend any money, any effort, any match you complete, you'll get more resources to build more stuff, right? It's a positive feedback loop. So
so I don't know. I mean, I kind of have really enjoyed in the arena that favorite cabin
mhm.
that has like the
Cooldown.
stops
Yeah.
cooldown. That's pretty sweet.
Mhm.
So I've kind of been thinking about getting one of those and doing more of a higher point shotgun build, maybe
Right.
with maces or something. I don't know. I mean, I have already a cheetah, I think you saw, and an RN seal, and I think those go well with that.
Yeah.
I've got what is it, 3-point generator? Yeah.
Yeah, the gas gen.
Um, But yeah, I don't know. I guess really just kind of what I'm looking for is, you know, I really enjoyed playing with you guys. It'd be nice to have a higher point, you know, vehicle I could play that would be effective. And I'm, like I said, not averse to buying some stuff in order to get there a little faster, or, you know, at least I know what to work towards.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So it's actually kind of funny because Regan and I sort of approach this in different ways. So I'm pretty much adamantly free to play. So I have probably close to 3,000-ish hours in Crossout at this point. And I've dropped like $100 total. And it's only because it's been exclusive like decor items that you can't get anywhere else other than buying the crowns and then buying them, or it's because it's a pack with items or structural parts that I really like, and I've waited until they're 50% off or whatnot. Regan, on the other hand, has played Warframe, which another free-to-play game, which we started playing back in December. She has probably got, I don't know the exact number, I haven't checked. In any case, it's definitely a lot less than 500 hours. I guess let's pull it up, shall we? Let's find out. I can empirically test this rather than guessing stuff. So Crossout, I have 140 days and 17 hours. So
nice.
3,300 hours-ish, 3,500 hours-ish. I mean, it's not always clear if they count like idling in the menu or whatnot. But
Well, probably because you could be building and.
yeah, and I know, like, for instance, Warframe has an in-game counter, and that doesn't match it. So it's, yeah, kind of out the window on how accurate it is. Yeah, so she has 20, yeah, so, yeah, around almost exactly 500 hours, according to this stat, in Warframe.
Nice.
And she has bought, like, she's made transactions in it, I think, at least 5 times at this point for, like, around $20 each. So, like, she spent the same amount of money in one game with a tenth the time that I have, you know? So, like, as people on the Reddit will say, and in general is very true to free-to-play games by design, is you kind of either, you pay with your money or you pay with your time. So if you're, you know, unemployed, it's a hell of a lot easier to go and do, you know, a plastic raid for 5 hours or whatever to make up coin, rather than you know, just spending money you don't have. Whereas if you have a full-time job, you have spending money, whatever, it's a little bit easier to splash, you know, $10 to give you like a month's worth of progression in the game, right? So yeah, to that end, I totally understand. I personally always hazard towards the I'd rather just grind it out thing. So that's generally going to be my personal preference / advice. But obviously you can, like, this is mostly a disclaimer that you can kind of just understand that that's where I'm coming from, where I don't spend money unless I feel like I have to. It makes it sound like an abusive relationship when I say have to, but unless it's a very appealing. So, yeah, as far as starting with this, I guess the question is more so if you're looking at doing a raid build or if you're looking at doing a PvP build, I guess, because those are
definitely PvP.
More so PvP?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's more my style of play. I mean, I come from, like, playing shooters, and so playing against people is usually more fun. Plus, you know, I have a raid build that can get by, it seems like, so.
Right, well, at least for medium raids, yeah.
At least for medium, yeah.
There's a drastic jump in between medium and hard. There's
I kind of figured, that's why I've been holding off.
Yeah, so to start with on the whole like raid thing to begin with, I know some people just literally don't do them at all. Again, from my perspective of the whole I'd rather spend time than money on stuff, they give you 200 free fuel every day once you're maxed out on your fuel tank size. So that gives you 1,400 fuel a week. And if you go to the challenges tab,
yeah. I try and do these because you can get all kinds of salvage. And
yeah, exactly. So I was actually referring to, the scroll down. Yeah. So the engineer badges. So you can trade those in for resources. You can trade those resources in for money with other people. You can sell containers. You can buy parts from prior battle passes. etc. So you'll note down near the bottom that the highest value ones are 500 for the hard raids. So what Weaved at Regan and I have prioritized doing is doing those every week. So what that looks like is you have enough fuel to run 3 hard raids and 1 easy raid a day. By the time you get to the end of the week, that gives you 80 fuel left over if you have no fails, and then at that point you can start spending fuel on things like doing the plastic raid if you want, because for instance plastic is the most lucrative raid for turning fuel into money if you end up reselling the item. So that's kind of what we focused on, and then that way you also sort of reduce the amount of time you need to dedicate to it, as opposed to doing 10 easy raids or 5 normal raids. You're doing 3 hard raids and 1 easy raid, and obviously the easy raid is generally a pushover. Like you can just sort of bring a really fast or like shotgun or melee build and just storm through everything on relevant game modes. So that's sort of what we've done to limit our time on it. I don't think either of us particularly would say it's our favorite way to play Crossout, but it is pretty great for getting progression. So if you complete the 2...
Yeah, these 500 points, that's great.
Yeah, well, because like I said, with just the default fuel they give you, you can complete both of those, which is 1,000. You can get, another 100, 150? Yeah, 100 for the easy raids. Then if you do the PvP challenges, there's 100 for scrap metal. There's another 150 for wires and 450 for batteries, I want to say. We already completed them. Yeah, so you still have them, we don't. So you got that. Then you've got the weekly challenge of just completing the dailies, which is another 400. So without even spending any additional fuel of your own, you can get pretty easily 2,000 badges a week. And if you get 3,000 badges, that gives you a Pathfinder's container, which you can either open for an epic item, although I don't generally like gambling, especially when the item value in there ranges from like 300 to 1,500. Or you can just straight up sell the container on the market for about 1,000, so 1,100, etc., like before tax. And like getting a new epic item basically every week and a half is, in my eyes, pretty good progression, because that doesn't include any of the fuel, any of the copper, any of the scrap, anything else you got from doing PvP or from doing your raids and then building stuff with it or selling it, etc. That's just literally 3 hard raids, 1 easy raid a day, and then completing your dailies, and then completing the wins in wires and batteries. So pretty low effort in my eyes. That being said, of course, if you are just one of the people who don't want to do raids at all, then by all means, I've just found that it's pretty effective for continually building wealth, especially because, I mean, it's literally, it's a daily. You can do it consistently every day.
Yeah, I've been doing them, just because any way I can earn stuff is
right.
Good at this point. Yeah,
when they have the EXP cap and they have the resource cap and whatnot, so having those as other options is great as well, right?
Yeah.
It's funny enough, I don't actually think we did raids yesterday, because I still have fuel and reset is in 11 minutes. So...
Oh, I'm taking up your time. You want to kick one off?
No, it's 11 minutes. I don't even have enough time to do anything about it at this point. I could get literally one in. No, I think we just got distracted. We kept... So, I don't know if you know, so it's daylight savings, right? And Russia doesn't, or at least Western Russia, doesn't seem to follow it. So as a result, the dailies got shoved back by an hour. And what that means is that the arena challenge also got shoved back by an hour. So beforehand it was 10 our time, which I guess would be, you said you're on Eastern Coast, so 1 a.m. your time. Yep. It's now 2 a.m. reset your time. So, and 11 p.m. for us. So if we want to do the arenas daily, the arena challenges, we have to wait till 11 p.m. or just say fuck it and then do it the next day. That's not what we did last night. So we waited till 11 and then we did them. And then at that point it was like we just totally forgot to do raids, I guess. That's fine, because, I mean, spending the, 120 fuel to catch up on them on the weekends is pretty minimal. So yeah, don't do what we did, I say, as we're both sitting here with full fuel tanks talking about doing raids consistently. But other than that small, glossed over component, the PvP experience is super... it's everywhere, and I mean, it looks like you just hit 30, so
Yeah.
Imagine you're probably going to be getting slightly more people now. I think the third, people are saying it's like between 1 and 10 is one bracket, 10 and 30 is another, and then Prestige 1 and onwards is another one, or something like that. I know if you mixed queue with people, those completely go out the window. Likewise, if you're a 5,000 queuing with a 9,000, you're going to get put in 9,000 lobbies. So, like, you're pretty much at the point where it probably doesn't matter if you queue with us or not, but just note that there will be probably different names and a lot more Seal Clubby builds going on. Because of course, if you just, if you keep playing the game, you're going to level up regardless. You can't stop leveling up. You can increase your rep game, but you can't really decrease it. So,
Right.
yeah, most of the players, I'm sure, sit in that last end category. So as far as sort of what we do to sort of kind of give you an idea of like the power score where we're at and whatnot. So I don't know if you've actually looked at it, but if you click on your profile icon in the upper right and then go to trials, there are different trials, as the name suggests, basically like achievements of sort, I guess, in game. So
Okay.
Completing each and any of those gives you customization. There is no like physical reward. You don't get money or EXP or standing or anything like that, but they give you more customization elements, and they've sort of worked in my eyes as a sort of like internal goal system for checking off each weapon and each weapon type. So you'll see there's the different machine gun tiers, and then there's shotguns, etc. Then, as you can see on the side there, there's raids, brawls, trade, etc. So basically, it's sort of a marker of doing X amount of activities in each area. So for all of the mission trials, I guess, you'll see that it's based off of destroying or assisting destroying enemies with weapon of X rarity and then getting X other patches for it. So what I've been using it as is sort of an overall progression guide. So what I did is I basically just started looking at the lowest tier and working upwards. So for instance, the machine gun rookie trial is the one for just using white machine guns, the default ones. There's also shotguns rookie, which is for the Lupara, and then the cannons rookie, which is for using the Avenger, using just the white tier items. So I've been using it kind of looking at, okay, I can use this to sort of benchmark my familiarity with each weapon as far as, class and rarity tier. And then I've been working up on it since. So I have almost all of them done now. I have all of the relic ones because they're fucking expensive to get relics. And then I have a few legendaries left. But what that ended up meaning is I didn't really make a lot of jumps in power score. Once I'd finish, the blue tier machine guns, I'd go do the blue tier shotguns or, melee or something like that. And I wouldn't really end up going a lot in power score. I would sort of just do side grades over and over and over until I completed all trials of one tier. So as a result, that got me really familiar with certain power score brackets at a time. And as a result, it also meant that I didn't have these like vast upwards movements. It was more side. So I've basically tried out and have pretty much every like cabin of epic tier, and I've been able to sort of pick around with every weapon and like cabin combination and whatnot like that, and that's given me a lot more familiarity with the game for all of the components they have and whatnot. So that's what I've done. As a result, we've just like with me starting the legendary trials, gotten to basically me being in the like 8, 9, 10,000 power score to sick. I'm using wireless headphones, but apparently I didn't actually plug them in last night, so it's beeping at me that it's low on battery, but that's fine. That's what I have the battery pack for. So we've been firmly in like the 8, 9, 10,000 power score mark for the last like, I don't know, it's like 6 months-ish. And I'll probably be there for a while more. So I'm really only going to go up in power score for me completing the trials. That being said, there is always the opportunity of us just running lower level stuff just to play with you. So the background for this is sort of me saying, you don't feel like you necessarily need to rush to like 8, 9, or 10,000 power score, because I'm there as a result of me running the second highest tier gear in the game just for completion's sake,
Mm-hmm.
So as far as what you got. Yeah, so that's already 10,000 power score. Is that working out for you okay in PvP, or is that a raid specific build?
Oh, I haven't even run this in PvP. So like, if I'm just doing, all I've done so far is scrap and wires, and I ran like this Spectre thing for forever. Well, forever in the few weeks I've played this.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to make a shotgun, so this is just with the parts that I have. I made this with these sledgehammers. And this is really fun. I really like to play this, but it's only 4,300 points.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly the thing too. Once you get to like the larger audience as well, you'll probably find that it can shoot up really quickly. So for us, and part of the reason why we specifically chose 8, 9, or 10,000, even though you can theoretically run legendary weapons up until like 14,000 power score if you want, is because at least for us, we found that the game basically divides the lobbies into like approximately 1,000 power score-ish blocks, and I don't know if the devs actually have like hard-coded this to say, oh, there's a power score tier of 4,000 to 5,000 and 5 to 6 or whatever, or if everybody thinks there is, and so they run like between 4 to 5,000, and as a result there's a bunch of people between 4 and 5,000, so it lumps them all together, so it looks like there's hard-coded rules. But in any case, they're good guidelines where anytime you're playing, you can more or less expect people within about like 1,500 power score of that. So it sucks at lower levels if you're a 5,500 against a 7,000, but if you're like a 7,500, it's not as big of a deal against 9,000, right?
Right.
And it tries to balance teams as well. So you'll have like, if we're duo queuing, then it will generally have at least a duo on the enemy team. If you have a bunch of 7,000s, it'll maybe throw you like a 9,000 and then have the enemies be mostly like in the middle of that. But it does an okay job. However, once you hit, and it varies from like week to week, which I imagine has to do with like player counts and who's on and what power scores and whatnot. But once you hit like this magical barrier of like I said, it's anywhere between 8 and 10,000, it will just say fuck it and fuck you, and it will throw you into lobbies with like 12,000s, 14,000s, 17,000s. So it's really a break point you don't want to find if you're an 8,000 or 9,000. So we've been playing around with it, and that's sort of where we've been at. But generally speaking, if you're in lower power scores, again, assuming you're not like duoing or trioing with higher power score teammates, you'll probably be mostly fighting people of the same power score. Mostly.
Yeah.
So you basically can like take that build as a basic version. You'll probably still find a lot of people in 4,000 to 5,000 in the like larger lobby, but again, there's the risk of people just going around with like double porcupines and wrecking everybody. And you can kind of iterate on that. Like, I don't know if you care to follow specifically the trials, or if if you have the money, you'll upgrade from sledgehammers to maces or whatnot, or whatever the case may be. But in any case, you can probably like graduate with the build. But keep in mind that, like I said, there's basically a breaking point where if you're bringing some of your good stuff, you better bring all of your fucking good stuff, because otherwise you're going to be rolled by people with like thousands of dollars of money that invested in the game.
Yeah.
So that's a magical point that kind of sucks to reach, but that is a thing. As far as PvP builds in general, you'll see a lot of, I mean, I mentioned this before in Arena. It's basically a really good like microcosm of Crossout in general, where a lot of the extreme CQC builds are incredibly meta. So you have the fire dogs, you have the melee builds, you have the shotgun wedges, as you've seen. Like all of those guys tend to be quite populous, and especially mine builds, basically regardless of power score. So building around,
those are incredible.
Yeah, well, they're overpowered is what they are. Building around them or building around countering them is pretty much always going to be a good idea, regardless of what power score you're at. That being said, as I mentioned before, there is a lot of animosity around some of the builds. So specifically, shotgun wedges are considered a unfair sort of build mechanic, insofar as building around the premise of lifting somebody in the sky and being unable to defend themselves. So they've tried touching on this in a few different ways. They tried instituting crush damage for melee. That hasn't they haven't done anything with that. What they added a few months ago and is still currently in the game, which is kind of a deterrent, is, and you may have noticed this, if you wedge somebody, you lose a lot of acceleration and movement speed. And that's sort of like just a temporary thing they've done. It prevents you from lifting somebody off the ground and then flying around as if you don't have, 10 tons on your shoulders. The next update that they're planning on doing, which I believe is supposed to drop when Arena ends here, is blunting most of the wedge parts. So the twin blade wings, the hatchet, the train plow, making them less angular in their physical hitboxes. I don't know if they're changing the mesh at all. I think it's just the hitbox, so that it's not as easy to lift people off the ground. Likewise, shotguns, for obvious reasons, have extremely low range but extremely high DPS. And in the case of the sledgehammer line, they also have ridiculously small hitboxes for reasons nobody can really understand. So as a result, you see a lot of shotgun wedges, which are nigh indestructible from the front due to all the melee parts, incredibly hard to strip due to the small hitboxes of the shotguns and them being, armored behind train plows. And then the whole animosity about wedges in general. So you can keep using shotgun wedges if you want. I'm not going to be, the police of Crossout or anything, but I will definitely say that while it is probably one of the most effective strategies, you will catch flack for it, and there are measures that they're trying to deploy. They've been trying to do it for literal years. They're not very good at dealing with wedges, but they're at least somewhat actively working on ways to try and make them less hold W to win, as the forums say.
That's interesting. I didn't even really... I've never used it as, lifting someone in the air. I've seen that happen to me sometimes, and, it's, accidental if I've ever done it. They're just incredibly powerful to just drive around and shoot with, right? That's funny.
Well, and again...
I haven't been using the most broken mechanic.
Well, yeah, and the strategy is sound, right? Because you have melee parts. They have, I'm assuming you've looked at them at least once or twice. You look at the train plow. It has one of the highest durability points in the game. Then it has melee damage resistance, so ramming into stuff barely scratches it. And then, of course, the nature of it also being angled means it's really easy to armor weapons with it. So it makes a lot of sense from a player standpoint, and it's extremely effective from a player standpoint. Apparently you're online now when you weren't before. Interesting. But, yeah. It's the sort of thing where, not to say it's necessarily wrong or right, but I don't personally mess around with, shotguns in general or wedges specifically. So I'm not going to be able to give you,
yeah, that's fine.
examples and experience specifically for that. That being said, you will find lots of builds on a fuck ton of builds on exhibitions around it, and it looks like you basically got the shape figured out, which is a train plow with the angled part up, 2 small plows behind it, tuck wheels in behind the small plows, and then put blade wings and hatchets on the front so that you can get under builds a lot more easily. That's pretty straightforwardly that's pretty much how the wedges work. So for this specific example, you basically got exactly that. You don't have the second small plow I generally see, which protects the cabin, but the basics are there. And I'm sure if you're running the Growl, you're probably running low on mass as well with all the melee parts.
Yeah, I almost have the bonus from Bulldog, the bonus weight, but I need 700 more wires.
Yeah, upgrading them is rough. I don't know if you've looked at the last one, but it's...
This one? Yeah.
It's right. Well, and it's funny too, because the last one isn't even that good as far as perks generally. That one's good. Master Jack's is good. Jade's is good, and then all the rest of them pretty much suck. So if you look at Stone Deaf and look at the last one, it's a 500 tonnage increase for the trucker cabin or something like that. Yeah, 558 on a blue cabin. It's practically worthless, especially for 3,000 coins
terrible.
Worth of resources. It's ridiculous.
It's terrible.
So I wouldn't generally worry about grabbing the last one, but yeah, leveling up all the co-drivers and getting them at least to rank 14 and having the second upgrade is definitely worthwhile for the bonuses they give. And it's the sort of thing too where, of course, you're going to be fighting people pretty much all in the same boat. So while some people may have the last upgrade unlocked, some people will be like me and just refuse to do it for the investment for the result.
Yeah.
But any advantage that you can get that people also have available is obviously just bonus for you, right? Likewise, like the low tier stuff like sledgehammers, you'll see pretty frequently people will fuse them, people will upgrade them, because the cost of one purple is generally more expensive than fusing multiple blue items together. And you can get like a 25-50%-ish bonus to effectiveness on fused items over regular ones, and it doesn't increase your power score, it can increase your durability, decrease your mass, etc. It's basically all profit if you know you're going to use it and if you have the extra money or items to fuse.
Yeah. I've noticed that that's pretty powerful, and that it doesn't increase your power score. That's like, seems kind of broken.
Yeah, well, and it's offset a lot by the randomness of it. So originally, I don't know if I assume you've upgraded, I don't know if it was during the events or not, but it used to be that you couldn't guarantee a fusion at all. So every time you fused, it would require another two copies of the item, and then it would re-roll all of the stats on it. So it was a complete crapshoot. And even before I got here, it was different, where they wouldn't give you 3 points from 3 categories. They'd only give you 1 from 1 category, but it would be a lot higher than they were. So even now, if you go on the exhibition and you search up for like a specific build, you'll notice that sometimes it'll be a fused item, but it won't say like cheetah. It'll say cheetah water cooled or like stuff like that.
Oh, interesting.
So that's a layover from the old system. But then it became the randomized, but with 3 stats, 3 categories. Then what they did as of 2 years ago when Regan and I started playing is they started having these events, which you probably saw this past weekend if you were on, where instead of requiring 3 copies of something, it would only require 2. So that literally, it literally...
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, and it halves the additional cost of it effectively, because instead of having the 1 item you're wanting to upgrade and 2 others, you only need 1 other. So it's a 33% reduction in materials, but if you're re-rolling stuff, it's a half reduction in materials you need. 50%, it's pretty severe. That being said, again, those are randomized. They also have the introduction of crafting events, which was 2 years ago in December, where instead of spending 3 randomly or 2 randomly, you could spend 2 plus about half the resources of making a third one, and it would give you a guaranteed fusion. So I don't know if you've been around long enough to see any of those, but for instance, during this past Christmas, it was where it wanted 2 humpbacks and then some electronics and batteries, etc. And then it would give you a humpback that had the minus mass and then the plus mass, max mass limit, guaranteed every time you wanted to fuse one of those. So those are extremely popular because it's a guaranteed fusion, and it requires like less than the random fusion of 3 normally. So on the flip side, of course, you can't get other fusions as a result of it. If you want something slightly different, you'd have to refuse that which you just got as a guaranteed crafting. Because it's crafting, this is where people get kind of pissy, and I understand where they're coming from. So if you hover over any of your fused items from the battle passes, you'll see how it has the no wrench icon on it. That is because you can't use it for crafting. That is probably partially to prevent people from like gaining a lot more benefit out of the items by like turning it into something else and then selling it. Like the battle pass is an enormous value, but it's locked to your account. So if you don't use the items, if you don't like the items, etc., you aren't really getting the benefit of them. But if you do, then it's great. It's like, each legendary is like 6 to 7 to 8,000 coins each. But as a result of the not for crafting sign on it, that means that you can't use it in the, and I quote unquote crafting event, where they take 2 and then some resources. They label it as crafting instead of upgrading because those items are upgradable, but because they're not craftable, you can't use that in that. So for instance, you have, I don't know what tier you're at in the battle pass. As a really good example though, the earlier battle passes, the Doomsday cars, they gave the cohort cabin, which you've probably seen. It's the big one with all the green cloud around it. So that one had a plus durability, plus self-destruct damage, plus power upgrade on it, which is okay, but because it's literally the like highest mass limit cabin in the game, generally you'd want the minus mass plus max mass limit so you can run even more ridiculous amounts of armor and movement parts and weapons. But because it's a not for crafting one, you can't use it during those events. You have to, at like best case, use it during the upgrade for 2 events, and then hope you get the fusion you want, which obviously gets prohibitively expensive when you're fusing legendaries. So that kind of sucks. However, the introduction of upgrade stabilizers, and this happened sometime within the last year, you probably have seen them, you probably have already got some of them. Those lock in one parameter for one fusion. As a result of that, if you get partially the fusion you want, or you craft the fusion you want, or craft during the quote-unquote crafting event, and then you want to upgrade after that, then you can lock in some and you can reroll the other attributes. So that's been like an absolute godsend, and people whine about it all the time, and I don't get it. I don't even use mine. I have 67 rare, 16 special, 5 epic, 5 legendary, and of course you can exchange them at the engineer's workbench for higher tiers. And I haven't yet to use them, but I know for a fact if I re-roll stuff, that is going to be incredibly helpful to have those stabilizers. Because it takes a re-roll of 3 stats and it makes it 1 or 2 as you see fit. So, yeah,
that's pretty sweet.
Doesn't
cool
completely
mechanic.
take out the randomness, of course, but you can literally roll the same, like all 3 rolls or the 1 roll if you lock in. You can roll them over and over the same, and that's luck, right? But yeah, it's been made a hell of a lot easier even since I started playing. So, it's quite nice for newer players, and you have a fuck ton of plastic and fuel just lying around. I'm quite impressed.
A lot of plastic and what?
Fuel. Because you get maybe 15 fuel per success. That's if you have the fuel tank
5.
and the fuel barrel. Oh my god! And you don't even have the rare
big
one.
Fuel tank.
Yeah, so you got a lot of wins under your belt, basically. Well, it's funny too.
I do okay.
Like I said, if you're doing the raids every week, the best use of fuel for money is just doing plastic raids. And from the looks of it, you already have been doing the plastic raids a fuck ton anyway. But yeah, so that's a really good source of cash if you're lacking on it, because a stack of it generally sells for about 100. So you can basically expect like a 1-to-1 ratio of plastic to coins. So in theory, you have about 1,800 coins worth of plastic. And then of course with the fuel, you can turn fuel into more plastic. And it's if you do like extremely well, it's a rate of about 1-to-1 for fuel to plastic. So therefore fuel to coins. Generally speaking, and especially if you don't have premium, it's more like a 1-to-0.5 ratio. But either way, it's still another 400-ish coins worth of fuel, which is definitely a lot better than the fact that you're literally sitting on like 250 coins worth of fuel currently, because that's how much it's worth if you just straight up sell the fuel.
All right.
Yeah, so that's a lot of talking about stuff that I guess you didn't ask for. As far
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Builds. Yeah, so to start with, that's definitely not starting with after 40 minutes of talking. Yeah, as far as builds, I think honestly, if you have a shotgun wedge and you're enjoying that sort of aesthetic, just continuing to work on upgrading the sledgehammer line. So as you have funds, as you have the ability to build stuff and slap it on, going to maces is sort of the next logical step. And you can, as you've probably seen a lot of fucking builds in Arena you can bring maces on a 12, 13, 14, 15 energy build into Arena, no problem, because they're special weapons and therefore they don't have a whole lot of power score.
Which ones are energy weapons? Maces are?
They're not energy weapons, no.
Yeah.
They're special weapons.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you misheard or if I misspoke, sorry.
Oh, you were saying that something was an energy weapon and didn't have a lot of power score when you brought it, if you bring it into Arena. I thought you were talking about maces, but I must have missed something.
I meant special tier. Yeah. So, so you can run 12, 13, or 14 energy builds. So you can slap on generators and whatnot.
Oh, right. Gotcha.
For instance, if you're running the kaiju or the vultures or other legendary items, you generally can't bring a whole lot of extra energy with you because the power score of legendary items is so much higher than special tier. But if you look at it, so What do I even have in your inventory? Yeah, I've got like nothing. So if you hover over the Vulture, for instance, so that has so-and-so power score, and it's always going to be the same, by the way. Anything of legendary tier is going to have 400 power score per energy point. So it has 1600 power score. So if you slap 2 of those on, that's 3200, which is a third of the limit for arena, even without using any literally anything else. So that's not even without a cabin. It's a third the limit.
Right.
So yeah, it can kind of crazy. If you look at the AC50 Storm, it's the same energy 4, but because it's a lower tier, the power score is significantly reduced. So instead of having a third of your build be in 2, you can have you could have 4 of them on your build in theory, and that's still about 3,000-ish, 3,200, I guess. So the lower tier it is, the less power score it is for the same energy. So as a result, that's why I said maces are fantastic in that aspect, because you can run 3 or 4 of them on a build. The maces are 3.
Yeah, they're the same. They're 3 energy too. Yeah.
So you can run 4 of them on a build for about that 3,000 power score. And as you've seen, they're pretty grossly effective. So that's sort of just a side note I was saying, is if you have a power score limit, running more stuff of the lower tier tends to be more effective. That being said, you've also probably definitely seen, or at least in the matches we've been in, where people will just straight up run like 3 porcupine relic items and then like nothing else on their build, or people will run like 2 legendary items and then like a minimal amount of other stuff. But yeah, you can get some pretty chonky builds with running multiple special tier items instead. So,
all right.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get up to the 8 or 10,000 power score in multiplayer really quickly, using the higher tier stuff is sort of the easiest answer. I don't have personal experience with the Vulture, so I can't pretend to know if it's like good or not for its power score or where it would be effective. So,
I mean, as a super noob, it seems like it is so not worth it. Like, they're like super weak, it seems to me. But
yeah, I mean, I had a lot of good experience with the Yagway, the step before the Vulture. So it just shoots it and then it like lasers stuff and then shoots them. It doesn't latch on, it doesn't cloak or anything. So the annoying potential of the Vulture seems really high, especially for being able to just like drop them in place, like fire and forget them. But
right.
Again, I don't have a whole lot of experience. If you wanted to run like your absolute highest power score build with what you have, then running those would basically be a necessity, because you don't have anything else that's, legendary tier. And because they're only 4 energy, you could run 2 of those and then your trombone pretty easily, because they're all reload weapons. And you could basically just run a purple cabin at that point, or a cyan cabin, a special cabin at that point, max out on your energy with additional modules, max out on your mass with armor, and you'd probably be 9 or 10,000 there, just because of how much power score the Vultures give you.
That's interesting. Yeah, just in messing around with those in the test drive or whatever, it just seems like for putting 2 of them on a truck and driving around, 3,200 points, and like the amount of damage they do is so small, it seems like. Right. Well, but that's I guess if you're in a battle with other people and like they can't do anything about those, it's maybe it's good. I don't know. Yeah, drones in general, autonomous weapons specifically, the only one that's quote unquote an autonomous weapon and not actually a drone is the Caucasus. I don't know if you've seen those yet, but they're ones where you have to manually lock onto enemies and then it will keep firing as long as they're within range and visible. So those are the only quote unquote automatic weapon that requires like input from you as far as targeting, but the rest of the like drones are effectively fire and forget, other than the Annihilators, which are manually targeted, and those are incredibly good. I really love using those. But in any case, drones are fire and forget. So there's like discussion in the community, because back when I first started playing in 2017 maybe, sounds about right. And then my brother and I played for a couple of months, and then we left because it was like the drone apocalypse, as people refer it to. So what was happening was these fire and forget weapons were so strong, people would just run 4 of them, just pop them up at the beginning of the match, and then they just do all the work. They were basically overtuned to the point where they were more effective than weapons that you had to manually aim.
and as a result, people were having issues being able to fight back against them, right? So now I think drones are in more or less a good state. Every time they get any sort of buff, people cry drone apocalypse, and anytime they get a nerf, people like cheer. But at the same time, the design of them should generally be, as people believe, that autonomous weapons should have a lower skill ceiling and thus a lower effectiveness ceiling. So to that end, like you said, and like you see, they don't do gross amounts of damage per second. And, you know, that's a good thing, I think, for the sake of, again, them being autonomous and not requiring a whole lot of input. So that's why putting them on really fast builds is pretty effective, because you can fire and forget and then drive away and keep driving. If you have the Cheetah engine, for instance, on regular drones, that will reduce their cooldown for every 100 meters you go. If you slap on Bigfoot wheels, that reduces it to 66 meters. And if you're going 120 kph, which is the speed cap without boosters, that means that every few seconds you're getting like a 15% cooldown reduction on your drones. So if you're running something like the fuse drones, which literally go up to enemies and blow themselves up, you can dish out a lot of them in a pretty short time period. And because they are explosive and drones generally tend to be a little bit more effective, you have a really high likelihood of popping some explosive off of somebody at some point, just because of sort of a volume of fire thing. So in general, I wouldn't say that the autonomous weapons are phenomenal for damage per second or anything like that, but the value lies in the ability to distract enemies, to deal a lot of damage if they aren't paying attention, if there's something crawling underneath them trying to reach their gas gen or whatnot, and the ability to sort of split attention, because if there's a drone they're trying to deal with, then that's them not shooting at a teammate, you know?
Right. Or if you're trying to, you know, take the final control point or defend an area.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Nice.
They're a good distraction and they deal okay damage. So it's been mentioned a lot of times not to like mix weaponry, and I generally wouldn't, especially with this. Like when I did my challenge for the Yaogwai, I did a Yaogwai specific build, but you could theoretically just bring a drone or a turret or something as a distraction, drop it somewhere, and then go and try and like flank people yourself. I don't think it'd be as effective as like trying to drop them to distract enemies while your team flanks or while you go for objective or something, but it is theoretically possible. And like that's actually the point I was going to make. So because the Yaogwai line, the Yaogwai and the Vulture run a reload system rather than that cooldown reduction on distance, you can run other reload weapons like the trombone with it, and you're effectively doubling their damage. So
yeah, that trombone is pretty sweet.
It feels overtuned for what it is. Personally, I've been wanting more heating options, because so far in the game we've only had 4 energy ones via the Aurora, which is basically a limited range machine gun, the Remedy, which is literally a flamethrower, or its descendants, which are higher power score, the Gravstar, which is an overheat shotgun and thus also has limited range, and then the Tempura, which I always forget about, but it's a melee weapon that basically blowtorches people on a reload. And you like never see it ever because it's not very good, but it's cool in premise. In any case, we didn't really have any heating options that were below 4 energy, which means if you're a heavy build and running cannons, you're shit out of luck, because the 2 cannons just by themselves is 12 energy, and because a heavy cabin has 11 energy rather than 12 like the medium and light cabins, you can only get 15. If you get to 15, you can't run a heat weapon and 2 6 energy weapons. So the trombone is a great addition insofar as being able to heat up stuff, especially for reload builds, because it's a reload weapon, but also for like cannons or other heavy builds that are running 12 energy of weaponry, like maybe on the Kaiju, for instance. That being said, it reloads ridiculously fast. Like you basically have like an 80-90% uptime with them like being heated up, and that's kind of crazy. Especially because, as you've seen, it has a lot of range. It fires multiple rockets, so even if you deke out or use like an Argus on one of them or whatnot, it's pretty good chance it's going to hit, unless the other person is like very well aware and running like drone counters, or is running like very specifically near cover or stuff like that. So I feel like it's overtuned. I feel like it's going to get nerfed, and mind you, I think I brought this up before. People think that the devs are definitely doing it on purpose, much like in mobile games where they'll release this new overpowered item and it will kind of dominate for anybody who, splashes cash in order to get access to it earlier. And then once it starts becoming like more mainstream, they nerf it. So I don't think that this season is as bad an example of that as the Parser and Destructor season, where they're both still around and menaces. But the trombone could be a lot more problemsome, but I imagine it'll probably be getting something of a nerf, even if it's just for like projectile speed, so you have to be a bit farther away for it to actually hit them or something.
Yeah, I think that's just, unfortunately, it's the standard playbook for game development. I mean, they're business, right? So,
well,
I mean, you could even go back to like before video games and like tabletop gaming, like Games Workshop, like they always make, like the best army is the one they just released.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and like I said, it depends on the model too, but especially for, free to play, where like obviously the best way they're going to get money is for convincing people to skip progression with spending money. It makes sense. And like to a certain degree, I think it's acceptable. I think the Destructors and Parsers have been disgusting, and they were over tweaked. Likewise, the Kaiju, because that thing is like a low tier pick now. It's not very good. Because they nerfed it like 3 times. It was incredibly problematic to begin with, but now it's like a shadow of its former self. But
I think as long as they're willing to tweak and adjust, it's fine.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've run into any players running nests, but those used to be probably the most broken. So what would happen is they're top-down precision missiles, just like the trombone. And what used to happen is if you looked at somebody and started holding the trigger to charge it up, even if you looked away, it would continue charging up and then it would fire. The only caveat being if you left range or they got behind cover or something, it would cancel. Then it would shoot up, over, down. And what was happening originally is they would blow up. They would basically embed through people's builds. So they'd go through the cabin, through the armor, whatever, basically target your frames. And it was basically like a 1 or 2 volley situation before your build was hobbled. So they nerfed that a lot. They made the missiles larger, I want to say 2 to 3 times larger, so they're easier to shoot off, easier to see, easier to counter. They made them no longer embed through armor, which was apparently a bug, and thus, obviously it makes sense to fix that. And then they also made it have differing projectile speeds. They've changed it a couple of times now. I couldn't even tell you if it's better or worse now. And then for targeting, you have to continually be looking at the target. They have to be in range. They have to be within line of sight. And then you have to let go before any of those conditions break. Otherwise, the volley will just cancel. So they basically got hit with all these nerfs at one time when really all they needed to do was fix the bug. So now the nests are I'm not even kidding when I say they're probably literally the worst weapon in the game. Like you could probably look on the exhibition and find a nest build and like run it against the damage sphere or build or something. It does like it's a 5 energy epic weapon. It takes time to charge up and target. It is projectiles, so you can dodge them by going behind cover. You can use an Argus to counter them. You can use a spark to destroy them. You can shoot them down with gunfire, shotguns, etc. And they only deal like 200 damage if the entire volley hits. So it's ridiculous.
Yeah, there's still 1,700 in the market.
And that's partly because of them being a Battle Pass craft exclusive. But if you press the Y key on that and find an exhibition, you'll see that, unless somebody has like made a good trombone build with something or something, you can test the damage on the build with multiple nests, and it does nothing. It tickles. So that was an example of where they like over nerfed it to absolute fuck, and it's basically worthless. Like I said, we were playing against somebody in arena a few days ago, and they killed Regan when she was already on fire, and I said it was probably literally the first nest kill I've seen since the nerf. So 600 damage when it hit multiple parse on an unarmored enemy when you ran 15 energy worth of nests. Wow. It's so not good. Yeah, so over buffing and over nerfing are both very much a thing. I wish the nests were better, but in any case, the trombone is obviously in the opposite department where it's incredibly good. And like my biggest gripe with it, honestly, is that it is only 2 energy rather than 3, because you can run 12 energy of whatever reload weapons. So you're dealing, your 2 cannons worth of damage, and then for only 2 energy more, you can literally double that damage. And like I said, it has an incredibly high uptime and relatively forgiving range at the moment, where it's basically for 2 energy, you effectively permanently double it until you lose any of your weapons, or you lose it, or they come and like barrel stuff you or something. It's incredibly forgiving for a weapon that doubles damage. So
yeah, seriously.
That's why I expect they're gonna change it out. That being said, if you are running any sort of reload weapon, especially in raids, a trombone is sort of like just the best in slot option, because it's disgusting in PvP, it's disgusting in PvE as well. So
yeah. Sweet.
As far
well, thanks for going through all this stuff.
Yeah. I like to talk. And I have a channel where I can upload all the talking, and it might actually be helpful info to someone at some point somewhere. So that's good. Yeah. So as far as like what you specifically have, which I guess was the entire point of this discussion, for like a higher power score pertinent build.
Well, yeah. I don't have a lot of stuff, right? So I don't need like a tailored. Like, oh, well, with these parts, you could do this. Like, kind of, you did that already, and telling me if I wanted to have a higher power score, I could run those vultures. I guess I kind of just, and we talked about this a little bit, I'm looking to have an effective, higher point PvP build. And I think I'll probably go for those maces, I think. That'd be fun to try.
Yeah, well, and they're some of the more expensive special items anyway as a result of how good they are, but still, like, a expensive special item is still half the cost of it, like an epic item generally, so...
yeah.
And like, you do have a couple of other things that you could do with builds as far as and that would be okay for power score. Like, generally, I recommend aiming for about 12 energy worth, like 10 to 12 energy worth of points in weapons, and then running the rest as your modules and whatnot. So obviously, you can only have one engine. If you're running a reload weapon, there's the reload boosters. If you're running a heat weapon, it gets a little bit more like nuanced, because you have to kind of balance, okay, how many radiators do I want, how many coolers do I want multiple of each, do I want a cloak alongside it? If you're running those sort of builds and you're in CQC, like on a shotgun build, do you want to run the wall hack radar so you see where people are, right? But
right.
Even with the fact that you have multiples of the same weapon makes it pretty easy to build around. So for instance, you had the 2 whirlwinds. That's a phenomenal example, because they're only 10 energy to begin with. So you can run it with, I wouldn't suggest running it with a trombone, for instance, but you could run it alongside a generator and then some radiators, some coolers. You could throw on an invisibility. You could throw on a engine so you move faster. You could throw on a scope, which I found incredibly helpful with them, that sort of stuff. So for instance, the build I was talking about that I had uploaded,
an expedition?
Yeah.
The spider
tarantula.
one?
Yeah, so that build runs a special generator, so the Ampere, which you have, but you could also use the P1 charge. It runs the 2 whirlwind, it runs a radiator, it runs a cooler, and it runs a scope. And that, plus the spider legs, slaps it up to 9,951 power score. So, again, you don't even need to go crazy with running... so you're going to have to click on the cog, and then... change it from build name to author name.
From build name to what?
So search by, it says blueprints in the top left. You want to click on authors in the top right. And then you're going to want to remove the nest since it doesn't have a nest on it. I'm totally sorry. I'm being crazy. You're right. It was actually a blueprint, but you'd want to remove the nest.
Oh, I don't wonder why I kept that in there. Gotcha.
Oh, it does that by
I guess
default.
you can search by multiple terms.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. So, yeah, I was thinking if you wanted to search for me specifically, but you don't necessarily need to do that. There's obviously a lot of tarantulas, because before the current spider build, which is Arachnida or whatever, the one before was called Tarantula. So, yeah, I'm not even on these pages. I don't think. Womp womp. So you could alternatively search by author and then save and then search my name in the search box, which is what I was going to say. And then I'm like, well, no, you can just search for tarantula and find it, but then evidently you couldn't find it. So yeah, so it's bronze break, one word. There's a second R in there. People have
I
a
have to put
terrible
the whole
habit of
thing.
missing that.
I want it. There we go. Did I spell that wrong?
Bronze is correct. Bronze break. Yeah, there's only one R. Sorry, I meant there's an R after bronze in bronze, and there's an R in break. I get people calling me Bronze Beak a lot.
Okay.
And then if it
There we
doesn't
go.
show up, then I wouldn't be concerned. But
What's HDPB stand for?
so you'll note that the B is underscore. So PB is the atomic symbol for lead. And the name of the clan that I made like a decade and a half ago was Heavy Duty Lead. And when we tried doing clan tags for it in games like Call of Duty, it was a 4-character limit, and HDL was already taken. So I just did HDPB, and I've been rocking that since. Which is supposed
So
to be...
this says...
Yeah, so Heavy Duty Lead, which is supposed to be indicative of running like beefier, heavy caliber weapons in games. Because
Gotcha.
I prefer running sniper rifles and like light machine guns over things like pistols or shotguns or whatnot. So this specific one, which you'll note, the scope is in a weird spot. So the logic, you just blew it off. So the logic being the whirlwinds are centered in this specific build so that you can shoot in any direction. There's 6 legs, which means it's kind of hard for people to get a grip on you with melee from pretty much any direction. And then there's the scope on the back behind the weapons so that you can see through the weapons and shoot, so there's less risk of the scope coming off. And then you can blow off the scope if there are enemies behind you, because the scope is actually in the way if you try and shoot directly behind. So
Oh, that's what that's for. Okay.
yeah, and you'll see that a lot in Exhibition. People will use it basically as extra blueprint slots for builds they aren't using. Like, that's what this currently is. This isn't me trying to like show it off. You'll note the armor isn't even symmetrical because I'm not done updating it since I first made it. So it's yeah, it's the sort of thing where you'll see a lot of like sort of nuanced builds where it's not 100% clear what they're doing, and you have to try and sort of like figure it out in reverse. But obviously there's sort of limitations to it. So for instance, like when you were like shooting around the guns rather than like looking between them with the scope, obviously you only had one firing at a time. So
Yeah.
it's, yeah. But in any case, that's an example of like you can take epic tier stuff up until the high power scores pretty easily. So likewise, you have the 3 therm from the battle pass. That's 12 energy of auto cannons. You could run that with a cooler, a radiator, an epic cabin. If you were really desperate for power score, you could run hovers, but because those are like 420 to 550 power score per, and you need at least 4 to be somewhat stable. People generally run 6 or 8, so that's like 2 to 3,000 power score right there. But yeah, if you're running like all epic parts on your build like this build is, it's incredibly easy to get up to the 9,000-10,000 power score mark.
Okay.
I found that good places to aim for, and this is sort of what I was talking about like with seal clubbing a few times earlier as well, where I find that a good place to aim is about 2,000 power score per rarity tier. So for instance, with the epic tier items, I find that like aiming between 6,000 and 8,000 power score tends to work quite well. Legendary 8 to 10, and then I don't have any relics, but in theory 10 plus, because again it's basically free for all for power score at that point. I found that's sort of what I try and aim for. So this is an example of one that's at a higher power score bracket than like that suggestion, partially due to the fact that it's running additional legs, and the legs are like 400 power score each, but also because I found the whirlwinds to be incredibly effective. So I pretty frequently was getting MVP or unyielding, which is lose but get half the points of the enemy MVP. With that, because people are generally terrible at dealing with snipers, and if you have a scope, you can outsnipe people a hell of a lot easier. So, yeah, I mean, I mean, you're obviously lacking legs for that build, but it wouldn't be too hard to, I think, just run like a heavier generator. You have the gas gen, for instance, run that, and then run, you know, maybe some of your tracks if you want mobility, run your epic cabin and get up into that power score quite easily. Likewise, the triple therm you could run. The Yongwang is, I feel, a rather underappreciated weapon. And that's another example of one that you could run very easily, because the Yongwang is 9 energy by itself. Running the trombone on it gives you 11 energy of epic weaponry. And then any supporting modules, a reload booster, an engine, a cloak, etc., would get you up into the 8 to 10,000 as well pretty easily.
All right, cool. Well, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah. Hopefully, I mean, it's not like we did like a step-by-step making your build like I've done with Reed in the past, but hopefully it's sort of useful.
Yeah, it just gives me a foundation. Yeah, I appreciate, you've got a lot of time in this, and I've had probably a lot of the growing pains already, and can save me from some of that.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I can talk like more specifically too about like my thoughts on this build, for instance, if you'd like, or my general thoughts on stuff, but a lot of it is going to be the same thing that people on like most of the beginner guides give for like not mixing weapon types or movement types or whatnot. So
right. No, I think I'm good for now. Actually, my wife's down here, so I'm gonna have to take a break.
Okay. Well, glad I could help. Obviously, thank you for letting me record this. I will post this and see if it's perhaps of any use to anybody else, and I guess I will catch you later.
All right, man. Take care.
You as well.